You're tuning in to Missouri NEA Connects, a podcast to focus on all things Missouri education, from policy to practice, so that each of us can unite, inspire, and lead from where we are. We're happy you're here.
Hi friends, Samantha Hayes here. I am just giving you a little brief intro. You are listening to the third episode of the Prosocial Education 5-part series with MNEA Connects. This is my conversation on Pillar 2, Inductive Discipline, with Dr. Bergin and Dr. Foster. Enjoy. Can you give us Jenn or Christi, can you give us an overview of the pillars again, just as a refresh? And then we'll start talking about praise.
All right. So the pillars of prosocial education are inductive discipline, which is really explaining to students how and why we want them to behave certain ways, so that they can really internalize what they should be doing and how to do that. We are using praise, which is just a social reward to encourage and promote the positive or prosocial behaviors that we're looking for in the classroom, that reinforces those behaviors and draws attention to more positive aspects of the classroom instead of focusing on so many reprimands. Then we also have teacher-student relationships, and we're talking about developing really strong relationships that are based on respect and trust, where students feel comfortable in coming to class, sharing their ideas, having conversations, and not worried about being judged or harshly treated and punished by their teachers. And then our final pillar is the emotionally upbeat classroom. And really, that is creating a positive, warm climate. It builds on the other pillars. Whenever you're doing all of those others, you really do create an emotionally upbeat classroom. But it is, again, a space where students are in a more positive mindset, which opens up the opportunity for more learning and critical thinking and problem solving to happen. And just being really intentional about establishing that learning environment in a way that will promote good quality learning, collaboration, and active participation in class.
Let's talk about inductive discipline, Pillar 2 today. What is, and Christi or Jenn, whoever wants to take the definition and a little bit of the research, you guys can volley back and forth between you. Let's just go over that definition and a little bit of the research on inductive discipline.
Discipline, the way we look at it, is teaching a child appropriate behavior. It's not punishment. And you have to think about what is your end goal for discipline. If your end goal is you want this child to grow, to become self-controlling, to learn how to repair harm that we all do on occasion, and to develop empathy, there's only one type of discipline that does that. And unfortunately, it's not the most commonly used one. But we call it inductive discipline, sometimes just induction for short. So it's about teaching a child to be self-controlling and to behave in ways that will foster their well-being within their community.
What's some of the research surrounding that? Why is it that we focus so much on, I'm guessing, maybe more of a punitive discipline rather than one that teaches?
So the research has been around for, probably 50, 60 years now, that if you want a child to learn to be self-controlling, that you need to discipline them in a way that teaches them what behavior is expected and that you believe in their ability to comply with those expectations. The most common form of discipline is what we call power assertion. And that's the most common that we use as parents. It's the most common we use as teachers. It just seems to be a part of human nature to, when you're interacting with children who are misbehaving, to just get on them about it and threaten them. If you don't change this behavior, then this bad thing is going to happen to you. So we define power assertion as controlling the child's behavior through resources or power that you have that they do not have. So in schools, that's giving red cards or keeping them in from recess or, marking them down in some way or making them sit in timeout. And it may even escalate all the way up to suspension. So these are all the different ways that we use our power as adults to essentially try to force children to behave in the way that we want them to. And it isn't even necessarily punishment oriented. It can be bribes or rewards. That's another way of controlling children from the outside, as opposed to teaching them to be controlling from the inside.
So that external internal factor is a big piece of this. Okay. What does this look like in a classroom? Again, some examples you probably give during trainings.
So I've got several different examples. One that was really coming to mind whenever I was thinking about this was, in schools, I hear a lot of the times, the student is in fourth grade. They should know better by now. So that kind of lends itself more to the power assertive type of discipline. And so we really work with teachers to try and help them. Okay, they must not know. For some reason, there's a reason behind why they don't know how they should be behaving in this moment. So let's teach them instead of punishing them for not knowing something. And so an example that I had was I was in a fourth grade classroom, actually. They had a opportunity to go to recess for the first time in a while because it was finally a nice day outside. And they go outside and the teacher was sitting on the teacher bench and she sees a child playing on a piece of playground equipment and she blows her whistle really loud and screams, "Get off of there. You know you're not supposed to be up there." And the teacher then turns and looks at me with this horrified expression on her face and she goes, "That is a new student. We haven't had recess outdoors since she came to our school. She has no idea that that piece of equipment is broken and is off limits to our students." And I just screamed at her across the playground. And she had been working on trying to improve teacher-student relationships and going through this program. And so I'm like, it's okay. So in that kind of instance, she went over, she apologized. She's like, "I'm sorry that I yelled at you. I forgot that you didn't know that this equipment was out of commission. There's a broken board. So I don't want you on there because I don't want you to get hurt," and explained to the student. When the student received the explanation of why to not climb on that piece of playground equipment, it absolutely made sense. The student is very willing to stay away from that playground equipment. And it was definitely a different kind of response. And the student received it much better than, "Get down off of there. You know you're not supposed to be on there." Because she didn't really know that and still had no idea why she couldn't be on there until the teacher took the time to explain. It's taking the time to really teach them what we want them to do and why we want them to do that so that they can internalize that and then they can turn around and they can control their own behavior, instead of constantly relying on the teacher to tell them, "Do this, don't do that." And so it puts a lot more onus of student behavioral regulation on the kids, as opposed to the teacher having to be in control of every single student behavior all day long, every day.
For sure. Thank you for that example. I know you've got tons, Jen. What is a tip or trick for a teacher in the classroom today? What is something that they could do to help shift to this more inductive discipline in their classroom?
I would say one of our biggest things that we talk about is being really proactive and breaking down what your expectations for the student's behavior before you start any learning activity or any day. We work on establishing class norms at the beginning of the school year, and each class has a different feel. So setting up a set of norms on how everyone wants to be treated and what their expectations are for being in that classroom. And then also revising those and revisiting those frequently. When you add new students, your classroom community changes. When you are engaging in a different type of learning experience for the day, the expectations may need to shift. So being very upfront with the kids at the very beginning of the learning experience or the class period and the school year, and helping them know, and then working with them so that they also feel like they're a valued member of that classroom community. some of those are great things that teachers can do to really help make sure that the kids know ahead of time what the expectations are. They're way more likely to engage in the behavior that you're wanting if they know that that's what you want them to do, instead of them trying to guess what it is that you want, and then the teacher being really reactive to the behavior when the student doesn't display what they're hoping to see.
I would add a couple other tips. So one is be aware of why you want kids to comply with a particular rule. So induction is all about explaining to them why you're asking them to do something or to stop doing something. I had a teacher once say to me that as she was just about to go into induction with a student, she suddenly realized she had no good reason. And she said, okay, I'm dropping that rule. you know so that would be an important one is, why are you asking them to change? Be prepared to explain that to them in a way that is legitimate to kids. The other is to use what we call victim-centered induction, which is pointing out how their behavior is affecting other people. That's a really important tool to have. My area of expertise is how to help children develop into socially and emotionally healthy people. And oftentimes I will be asked, I have this student who doesn't seem to have any empathy. I'll say, that hurts so-and-so, and he'll say, so I don't care. So how do you create empathy in a child who does not seem to be empathic? And again, this is your powerhouse tool for building empathy, is to use induction that is centered on other people. Because what you're doing is you're teaching the child to pay attention to how their behavior affects other people. And that's what empathy is about. So, you're teaching them to tune in to other people's well-being.
I would say one other that comes to mind, one other tool that we use is, when appropriate, allowing students to negotiate things. So we give them a reason for complying, or why we want them to do a behavior, but sometimes that's open to negotiation, and not always, but if a child doesn't have the appropriate utensil to write with, if you want them to use a red pen to grade papers and they don't happen to have red but they have purple, is that an appropriate level of negotiation and problem solving? So obviously we're not talking about negotiating when they're going to come to school or not, but whenever there's little things within the classroom that you're asking them to do things and they come up with an alternative and you're like, hey, that's reasonable. As long as it's reasonable and it's not the hill upon which you want to die, then let's go for it. And that definitely teaches them some problem solving and critical thinking skills, but also gives them a little bit of say in how they are going to be behaving, so that they start to learn what's right, what's wrong, what's okay, what's not okay, and when they can vie for themselves. And sometimes the teacher can say, hey, no, we're going to have to stick to this. This is what it has to be today. But you can also defend that and explain, why that is, so that the kids can start to learn that. So negotiation is another really critical piece of technique for them.
And that is innately in kids, to negotiating. Some people call it pushing boundaries. I call it negotiating. My 4-year-old and my 3-year-old are already there. So I know by the time they get to kindergarten, I am definitely going to be pushing the inductive discipline prosocial A, but then also the inductive discipline pillar. Like, where is it in this space that we can allow for negotiation to happen? And also, I would think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I would think that would help the students feel like they have more ownership in the classroom if they're like, oh, I am able to make decisions in this space as well, even if it wasn't initially what the teacher said. So I think that's a really great point.
I think, Samantha, with your children are quite little still. And one of the things that's beautiful about using induction is that when you use it on small children, then you don't have to discipline them much at all by the time they're teenagers, because they're very self-controlling by then. And it becomes the best time of life to have those teenagers in the house. It is so much fun. So this is a strategy that works with 2-year-olds to 20-year-olds.
I love it. You're giving me hope and excitement for the teenage years because I was a little worried. So thank you.
I will add that my 17-year-old, she's 19 now, but when she was 17, she wanted to do something late at night, and she had to get up early for a volleyball tournament the next day. And she wanted to go out and hang out with her friends and be home not until like 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was in the middle of working on something, and I just said no. And she said, well, why? And I said, because I said so. And she knows that what I do. And she said, you teach your teachers all the time not to say that. And I said, I know. So I had to stop what I was working on and explain. And she was like, well, why didn't you just say that? I just thought it was because you don't trust me and my friends. And I'm like, no, it's because 3 hours of sleep is not enough to sustain your body when you're getting ready to go play 9 hours of volleyball. That's a reason. So whenever I was able to provide that concrete reason, it helped it to make sense. And at the time, whenever I just said no, and because I said so, that really was like, I don't trust you. I don't trust your decision making. All of those things is what it communicated to her. And I was the whole time like, this is completely unreasonable. Why would you want to do that to start with? And so it's a great tool for communicating with people and helping them to understand there's a reason we're asking you to do things, and it shows a lot of respect, and builds that's how it strengthens that relationship with the person that you're working through this induction discipline situation.
So everywhere from your own children to your students to fellow human beings, no matter what position they're in. Love it. What do you do so I know last pillar works pretty quickly. What about inductive discipline? What do you do if it doesn't? What do teachers do if it's like not seeming to catch on? Or if it does it catch on quickly? Like what have you guys seen?
So generally it takes a minimum of about 6 months for us to see teachers move from predominantly using power assertion to predominantly using induction. So this is not a quick and easy, but it is also the most powerful tool that you have, and one that is well worth the effort in learning to do. So it takes time. You have to give yourself grace, recognize that you will flub up. All of us do. All of us do sometimes, because we get hungry, tired, busy, whatever. And, it's just like, just do what I say, kind of response. So, but you don't want it to be your predominant. You want induction to be your predominant response. And you ask, what do you do if kids refuse? I can guarantee they will refuse, because children have their own agendas. They are not robots. And so there's always going to be some disagreement or conflict between what they want to do and what you want them to do. And so induction is about persuading them to your side or your way of thinking, right? But sometimes they're just not going to agree. And so we teach a particular tactic that I call persistent persuasion, which is that you keep using the induction, you keep requesting, you state the command, you repeat the request, you stay firm, you stay friendly, you don't escalate to power assertion. You might even give suggestions or compromises or something until you can work on getting compliance from that kid. Once you get compliance, then you are so cooperative. You are such a helper. I don't care if it took you 6 minutes to get there. You still say, you are cooperative, you are helpful, because you're helping the child reshape their sense of self and create a more prosocial self-identity. And what you will find is that's hard to do initially, right? But as you do it more and more with the same child, it's going to take less and less time. And so behavior tends to deteriorate over a school year. It gets harder by the end of the school year, sometimes to get kids to do things you want them to do. With induction, the opposite happens. So you front load at the beginning of the school year, you invest some time into doing induction, and as the school year progresses, you get to a point where you hardly ever have to use any kind of discipline because they're self-controlling in your classroom.
Yeah. The students are really, they tend to comply more towards the end of the year whenever you use induction, because for the most part, kids still do want their teacher to be happy, and a lot of them will do things to try and respond to whatever the teacher wants. Whenever you build strong relationships with them, if they don't like you, they're probably not going to perform the things that you're asking them to do. Induction discipline is one of those pillars that really supports the others. So the more you use induction, the stronger your teacher-student relationships are going to be, because you're communicating that you respect them enough to explain why you want them to do the thing and how to do it. You're also showing them that you value them in their in their classroom, because you're doing the you are, and you're helping them to see that they're a valued member of your community. So that helps to strengthen that relationship. And the stronger that relationship is, the more willing they are to engage in whatever the activity is, and for longer periods of time. So towards the end of the school year, you don't struggle with as many behavioral issues, because you front loaded with building that teacher-student relationship and teaching the kids what it is that they should be doing and how to do it. So those two pieces are already taken care of, and the rest of the school year runs pretty smoothly. So it may take a little bit more time at the beginning of the year, but one thing that we are finding is that teachers, especially towards the end of the school year, are finding that they are gaining, Christi, you said on average 30 minutes of instructional time per week for some of their classes, because they're not having to deal with those unwanted behaviors, because they took the time at the beginning of the year to really make sure that everybody was understanding what you wanted, and you had those strong relationships.
Incredible. Who doesn't want 30 more minutes a week? Love it. Well, you also answered, how does it work with the other pillars? Love to hear that. I am going to ask you hashtag for inductive discipline. What's your hashtag?
Mine might be hashtag discipline is a teaching moment.
I should have done my homework and prepared my hashtag ahead of time, like Sam told us to do. Hashtag, I think inductive discipline deals a lot with the why behind the behavior. So hashtag why.
I thought about that one. I thought tune into empathy, but the why was a good one as well. I was like, ooh, something with why, explaining your expectation. Well, I'm very excited that we have 2 more left. We still have teacher-student relationship and upbeat classroom. Very excited I get to spend more time with each of you. And yeah, I'll see you for the next one. Okay?
Thanks, Samantha.
Thanks, Sam.